Hey y'all, I made this other video about the hyperinflationary endgame, and I hesitated to post it because it seemed kind of dark, I guess, and I wasn't really sure if it was meant for publishing. And since then, we've had this last rate hike and some crypto carnage, and now it's kind of proven to be maybe more applicable. But I also want to do two things. I want to do a real quick crypto update, and then I want to give a brief perspective of the opposite side instead of the hyperinflation, if they actually commit to a deflationary cycle in order to preserve the currency, what that would look like. And then I'll attach on this other maybe 30-minute video of the hyperinflation cycle, which includes war, whereas the deflation cycle avoids war. And it's more of the, well, anyways, first, crypto. So crypto has been a bloodbath for pretty much all the cryptos, except for the stable dollars, because they've just maintained $1, except for one or two of them actually did fail. And there could be more failures assuming the crypto keeps selling off. There's a lot of leverage still in the market, and that could be liquidated. We've seen some of it, but not capitulation, that's for sure. We're still in the bear fear cycle, and yet I'm still buying. So I'm like, you could say that's not smart. You could say that's very stupid to be like catching these falling knives. And it's not really that smart. But I am putting more and more value into Bitcoin Cash, and I'm getting more Bitcoin Cash. So I have more Bitcoin Cash now than I've ever had before, even though prices are right near their low. And that's the time you want to buy. They're not setting the low. I think the low for Bitcoin Cash is maybe $78 or $80. And last I checked, it was around $110. So it's still a ways away from its lows. It's singular low. And we'll see if it hits that. So a lot of people, they'll continually compare Bitcoin Cash to BTC, Bitcoin Core Bitcoin. And they'll talk about like ratios and whatnot. I don't want to make I guess, to say that where the bottom is, they follow similar price action. And the thing between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core are that everyone who forked into Bitcoin Cash, everyone who held Bitcoin Core, ended up with Bitcoin Cash. So it created this whole selling potential. But you can't just fork into the race, if that makes sense. So Bitcoin is this giant mining network that's decentralized throughout the planet, that's mining this hashing algorithm. It's like the biggest, most sophisticated supercomputer in the world, and it's hashing some equation to find imaginary numbers and then validate these transactions. And it's not inherently hard to do, but it's made hard to do because of all the competition. So as the price goes up, it's developed this whole hardware ecosystem and scaled this network to be able to handle the global currency transactions. And there's essentially 4 contestants in the competition for who's using this global mining network, which is mining imaginary numbers, but that is what secures the trustless network of the network, because otherwise you always have some centralized fiat control system, or you have a vulnerability as far as the centralization, as far as people influencing it, as far as it being able to be hacked or whatever. So this is a blockchain. Well, let's see. Not all the contestants are necessarily blockchains. So the biggest contestant that has the most market share, Bitcoin Core, BTC, they did a soft fork where it caused the nature of the protocol to be degraded from a blockchain to a consensus algorithm. So no longer does its blockchain exist as a chain of transactions that can be traced back to the original mining of each coin. The SegWit version, which is Bitcoin Core, BTC, it has a sequence of blocks, which each block summarizes the transactions, but not each transaction is in the blockchain. So it's formed a consensus algorithm to consolidate the transactions of each block and create a segregated witness that is able to be like who is the segregated witness? The segregated witness is what is witnessing all the blockchain, the chain of transactions, and then consolidating it into like, these are all the outcomes of the block and these are the addresses that have it. So it's what consolidates from the blockchain to the consensus algorithm. So they coded it in to degrade the disintermediation of the protocol and to intermediate with the segregated witness via the code, but then which can be accessed through the third party that wants to control the system. So the 3 other contestants don't have that. The 3 other contestants are blockchains, and a lot of people say that because they have a very small percentage of the hashing network, that they can be attacked with 51% attacks, which means that if you get a majority of the hashing power, you can reconsolidate the transactions that happened within the last 10 blocks, which is roughly 10 hours. So you can create a degree of insecurity for the transactions. No, it's 100 minutes for the last 100 minutes, not 10 hours. You can create a degree of insecurity relative to all the transactions in the last 100 minutes. But other than that, nothing can happen. That's the only risk that exists, is that someone can spend money and use that money to money being value. Interesting. The whole thing about money and currency, like if you watch Mike Maloney, he's like a stickler about separating when you use money and when you use currency. But if you're talking about the value of something, you use your purchasing power. If you use your money via your currency. So I'm not gonna say that only gold is money anymore, but what underlies the value of the purchasing power? So the value is the value. The value is the money, and then the currency transmits the value. And gold just is inherently valuable, but it's the value that's the money. That's my new definition I just learned, and probably in reflection of maybe someone listening to this video too, who knows. So real time now is the only time that exists, and when we come together, then that's where the magic happens. So, and yeah, it's not unique to me. It's accessible in every relativity. That's just what it means to be in relation with others. So the insecurity is only related to the last 100 minutes. Otherwise, the blockchains, those 3 blockchains, the 3 contestants, can't be changed. So that we're all in the game together, these 4 contestants. The BTC has the vast majority of the market cap, so they control most of this mining network. And then Bitcoin Cash, my favorite, and then there is eCash, and then there is Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision. So I'm not going to go over the differences between them right now because I feel like that would be getting off topic. But the reality is that this mining network is here to stay, this Bitcoin mining network. Like, people have already invested in the hardware, and the difficulty adjustment will change. So no matter if there's 10 people mining it or if there's 1 million people mining it, it's going to be mined. It's going to continue to exist going into the future. And there's a limited supply of 28 million for each contestant. So where we place our values is a reflection of our principles and our ideals. So I'm only in Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Core is degraded and it's overpriced and it doesn't work. Why would I place any value there? It's completely the greater fool theory. People think that because there's more money in that one, I want to put my money in that one because that's the one where the new money is going to go in, not realizing that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And it's the biggest risk. So if we're thinking like what's the low of Bitcoin Core compared to the low of Bitcoin Cash? So the low of Bitcoin Core is 0. The low of Bitcoin Cash is 78. That's technically true. Even though Bitcoin Cash is rooted in the original Bitcoin, as far as it trading as a unique fork, having separated out all of those whom were unprincipled in their willingness to degrade themselves and become corrupted. So it was like the original Bitcoin had no discernment. it was tolerant of everyone. As soon as there was the SegWit BCH fork, Bitcoin Cash fork, there was, from one there were two. It's like Genesis in cryptocurrency. From one there were two, and the communities separated. At first it wasn't super clear what the differences were, but over time it became clear that one of them has a consensus and yet it doesn't work as well. The other one has less market cap, less capital, but it works better. So there's that. Plus, there's the aspect of how SegWit degraded the one, but most people still don't realize that. That's like a 1 in 100 million in the world understand that concept. But listening to this, that ratio is going down quick, maybe by an order of magnitude. It might already be 1 in 10 million as a result of this video. If there's 10 people who are like, yeah, I understand now how SegWit inherently degraded the blockchain and intermediated a segregated witness. And that's why they paid so much money to all these influencers and bought their consent to hype Bitcoin Core and then trash Bitcoin Cash. So what that did is it created, it's like knowledge of good and evil between like a black and a white in a way, where this is those who will sell out for more purchasing power, and then this is those who stick to the ideals, the idea of a currency that is frictionless, that is trustless, that stick with the original idea. So it's easy to choose one or the other in hindsight, especially if you don't have any value at risk now. If you see that one costs 2 times as much as the other one, but there's the same supply, one is overpriced, overhyped, and doesn't work, and the other one is way cheaper, it works really well, and it has the people who stick with their ideals, and there's the same supply of both. Like if you're getting in now, there's no question of which one is a wise choice. But the greater fool will always pick the overpriced, overhyped one because they look at the history and they think, well, it's just going to continue that way. That's just the nature of the whole thing. So then we have the other separations which further distinguish Bitcoin Cash. So there's a fork off of Bitcoin Cash where one guy claims to be the originator and that his dictates are what is important, and he will be the one to judge and hold everyone to account. And he created a trajectory of big blocks, and thinking that all of this data and these big blocks has to be on the blockchain, that's what the purpose of this blockchain is to have big blocks with weather data on it. Like all the data needs to be on this blockchain. When, of course, the original idea isn't let's put all the data on a blockchain, it's let's put the financial transactions on a blockchain. I shouldn't have killed that one. I thought it was a mosquito, so that was bad. You gotta have knowledge between good and bad. If it's not a mosquito, it's not a bloodsucker, that's a parasitical predator, and that deserves death just in relation. If it's just a flying bugger, then it was my fault. Sorry, bugger, for killing it. So I just incurred some negative karma, and hopefully by explaining and atoning and apologizing, I get forgiveness from that bug. Because that bug exists in relation, the butterfly effect, with another consciousness somewhere else, and that's like squashing a neutral consciousness as opposed to squashing a parasitical, predatory, negative thing that only thing to do with mosquitoes is to kill them. But that doesn't mean go exterminate all the mosquitoes, because there's other things that eat the mosquitoes. Just kill the ones that are in my environment that I'm responsible for. Anyways, tangents. So there's the difference. So the original idea is let's just put all the financial transactions on the blockchain because that's what we need a blockchain for. You don't need all data on a blockchain. It's just stupid. And then the third one is splitting off of Bitcoin Cash. This one is eCash, and they split it off with like a socialized model of kind of governance. It's kind of socialized, but it's kind of tyrannical, where it's like one guy or kind of a group of people split off and they're just like, we're going to take a certain amount of the incentive reward that goes to the miners for maintaining this, and we are going to take that value so that we can maintain and upgrade the blockchain, which is already working. And then what we're left with is so Bitcoin Cash is, it's not leaving everything as it was, the blockchain that, I mean, it was working. It's questionable whether it really needs to be upgraded other than scaling, but it is getting upgraded in ways that the community reaches a consensus that says that these things are good, that these upgrades are beneficial. So it's not stagnant, it's evolving in it developed its own way of adapting via this community chip process. I don't know exactly even what it stands for. Implementation protocol community. What would be the H? I don't know. Maybe it's not community. Consensus algorithm chip. I don't know. I feel like an idiot. But I don't know all the stuff in Bitcoin Cash. But I probably know more than 1 in 10 million people. Probably in the one between 1 in 10 million and 1 in 100 million. That's probably the range in which my my knowledge of the subject in lies. So that would just be a guess. So what about it? What are we talking about? Well, that's a lot of information, and that's why I'm putting money into it. It's like the dollar. So I guess we'll slowly transition into the deflationary. So they just passed this interest rate rise, and that's causing it's causing all sorts of instability in the financial markets, and then it's going to affect the real estate markets. And this all has to happen as if they want to save the dollar. So the alternative is the hyperinflation. I'm gonna insert that video directly after this one. And if they want to save the dollar from this inflation and not have prices just completely change permanently for everything, because one issue with that is the actual currency that we use. So it used to be that money was the gold and silver, and currency was like what am I saying? And in the Constitution, the money is gold and silver. So a silver dollar is $1, and an ounce of gold, a gold dollar, or it would be $20. That's how it was for a long time until they degraded it to 27 and then to 35 for gold. Until then they broke the peg. But regardless, so there was the money, and then there was currency. There was paper notes that traded in parallel with that. Now the money is essentially debt, and the currency are the debt notes. But what do we call what the mint makes? The change. So they create change at a loss. So it costs more for everything except for the quarter. The quarter might be profitable. The dime might be profitable. I'm not sure. But pennies and nickels are unprofitable for the mint to make. So at some point, the mint will stop making coins. And at that point, or they'll stop making pennies and nickels because it'll just become too unprofitable. And at that point, pennies and nickels are no longer a thing. Then we just round to the nearest dime for everything because everything becomes more, and there's no point in dealing with decimals greater than 1 when you ring up things at the cash register. So instead of saying this is like 28.33, it was just going to be $28.3 for probably like 10 years, and then they'll just drop the decimal. Assuming, because it's like they want to avoid the hyperinflation, and they want to avoid the complete deflation, depression, collapse, and so they try to navigate through the middle, they being the Fed and the money masters behind the Fed, because the people in control don't actually work at the Fed. The Fed is a cartel of banks. Well, the Fed is an institution which has the authority to regulate the interest rates for the that the banks are paying. They basically have authority over all the banks, but the shareholders are the banks, and they have authority over the currency. But they're not controlled by the people, even though sometimes presidents influence the Fed officials and supposedly like they appoint the chair or something, but it's really a private cartel of banks. So the big banks are the shareholders. It was passed by all of these bankers in a secret meeting on Jekyll Island in Georgia. I think it's in Georgia or Atlanta or something like that. With the Warburgs and the representatives from the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and a handful of other wealthy bankers. So they conspire to make a cartel in order to be able to control the debt and credit cycles so that they can become the masters of the nation. A nation being a people, a country being a land, but just for reference, because not everyone understands the distinction between those, or between a state. So I am putting my value in Bitcoin Cash because I have more confidence in Bitcoin Cash than I have in this system of, and it's not even confidence, it's, well, it is confidence, but even more than the confidence, it's that I place, because I understand the value could keep going down of Bitcoin Cash, because there's a social and network effect of what that value represents, and it can be dumped from places unseen and unknown. But the reason I want to place value in Bitcoin Cash as opposed to this banking cartel system is because I can see and I can verify that the total supply, and that it's following this algorithm, and it's neutral in a way. It's not a cartel of banks trying to steal all my money. It's maybe a cartel of miners that want to maximize their profit, sure. And they've done that with BTC, Bitcoin Core. But at some point, I suppose I want to say the people maybe the miners are really behind the Bitcoin Core agreement. And who are the miners? I don't really know. They're kind of... So it's like the miners become the new bankers. Those who control the technology of the mining of it and everything. And while that's not great, at least there's a mathematical cap to it, where there's no mathematical cap to the dollar. But there's just people, like, they say that they're going to prevent it from hyperinflating away, but I don't think they will. And the dollar is in its dying days, as far as I can tell, whereas Bitcoin is in its early days. It's maybe like a toddler or something. And that's why I'm putting more value in Bitcoin Cash. So I keep catching falling knives, which means as the price is dropping, you keep buying it. That one's also not a mosquito. So I'm going to leave that one be. And I now have more Bitcoin Cash than ever before. What I have not done is sold any precious metals yet in order to buy more Bitcoin Cash. Like, the nature of the precious metals, that they're less liquid, it makes them much easier to save. And I've gone through this many times or at least several times, where I've run out of currency. I don't have any money anymore using that form of thinking, because the whole idea that precious metals are the money and currency is more recent to these past examples. And so when I ran out of my money, I just didn't spend any money, and I figured out what to do to fix that problem. I didn't sell the silver that I had in order to be have more spending money. So it helps to save, to have at least some precious metals. And there's no right answer of how much or whatever, so it's unique to everyone. But from my perspective, it's just been accumulating. In times of abundance, maybe just put a little bit of aside for that, and that becomes like a core position that accumulates. Okay, what else about cryptocurrency? That I might convert some metals to cryptocurrency if it gets low enough, but it's like a very long cycle. I'm not doing this short-term volatility thing where I will put the fiat into cryptocurrency. I think I'll probably have to let the cat in, and she'll do a lot of whining. She's a whiny girl. Anyways, to the deflationary. Deflationary cycle means that they contract the credit, and in so doing, they take everything over, because everyone goes bankrupt who is out on leverage, which is most everyone, because that's what's been incentivized for the long cycles, would be like 70, 80 years. And in so doing, they multiply their power and property by orders of magnitude, and most people end up having to be liquidated and working for the state. So it's very similar to the hyperinflationary one. It's just that in the hyperinflationary one, it seems like things are growing number-wise, whereas in the hyperdeflationary one, everything, the psychological kind of depression sets in, and it's a less exciting and more depressing form of the collapse. But they can both lead to similar outcomes of basically extreme governmental control, and that's just the bankers who are utilizing the government in order to mobilize the people to do what they want to do in order to get more power. Because if they consolidate all their power within the jurisdiction where they have control, then they'll send those people to fight against the other jurisdictions where they don't have control in order to gain more power. And that's why wars are fought, pretty much. So the war cycle risk is high, and the strange thing about wars these days is that if you cross a certain line, there's supposedly these super destructive weapons that uh, can destroy and kind of negate the whole mobilization of infantry aspect. But there's also the aspect of not wanting to destroy everything, and bankers on both sides that both want to kind of liquidate the useless masses as they see them, the deplorables. And let's focus on the positives here without getting too dark. So the positives are that I think the deflationary positive is that people return to more community, whereas in the hyperinflation, people rely more and more on the government until it just breaks, and then they have like a really rapid uh, starvation cycle. But it's kind of hard to know. But let's stick with the likelihood of that they're going to thread the needle in the middle. So what it's going to lead to is keeping the conflict with Russia, and there's going to be other people stepping up and creating these conflicts. China, Russia, Turkey, being the main three, that they'll all basically China, Russia, Turkey, and Iran as well, and they will all be kind of flexing in their local way and demonstrating that the U.S. is no longer the global patriarch, rules maker, enforcer, policeman, and there'll be seemingly low intensity, or they'll stay below the threshold of nukes, and yet the U.S. neocons and idiotic administration currently, they're kind of realizing that all they can do is escalate to nukes, and that's their main weapon to prevent them from losing. So it's like this dangerous brinksmanship of like, we're going to destroy you, but we're going to grind you down slowly enough so that you never reach the nukes. And then the other side is like, we're going to provoke you, but we're not going to provoke you fast enough that you use the nukes. So on that level, it's like one's grinding the other down, the other one is like provoking them, but not enough to stop the grind. And then the economies, it's like the economy is gonna be like failing over here, and these other guys are like making more money, but they don't want it to get too extreme because they don't want it to go nuclear. So it's like this, like just awful like grind against victim provocation at the same time, which is so unhealthy. But I guess it's what's necessary for this transition to happen from the unipolar to the multipolar, to accept that. And it's all due to the lack of the ability of these neocons to accept reality and to just grasp on to the last moment their nuclear power. And maybe there's the ability to kind of separate them from that perceived power, but that's the most likely scenario, is that for probably the next several years we're going to see this situation unfolding where as it in the US and the Western European countries and the UK controlled countries, the quality of life will go down, and the risk of being kind of drawn into this warfare, this just and the economic calamity that goes, and then social strife and all of this mixed together. And then on the other side, there's kind of like a degree of prosperity, determination, sacrifice, and it's like they're finally being able to express themselves in ways that they haven't been able to before. And despite the sacrifices that they have to make to do that, they see them as like heroes, as opposed to like in the Western side, the sacrifices are just like completely useless, wasted cannon fodder of people who just have no ideals, and they just consent to the power system. So it's almost like taking the trash out. It's like, I don't want to take the trash out, but I'm going to take the trash out because otherwise it's going to pile up, and it's going to take some time, and I might get dirty and messy, but I'll be glad when it's all done. Kind of vibe for several years. And yeah, I think that precious metals are going to, and I've said this for a long time, that there's going to be, I think they'll move differently than the cryptocurrencies. I think the precious metals are about to take off and go up a lot, and in dollar value price, and the cryptocurrencies could continue to go down for a little while, as all of that leverage gets flushed out, because there's not that leverage in the metals. The leverage is in the crypto. However, there is inherent value in the crypto and its ability to be a trustless currency. So my concern is the timing of when to transition the metals that have been stored and to convert them into crypto for liquidity and speculative additional purchasing power. But that's like the riskiest of moves, because everything will be really tight and mostly illiquid then, and it might not even be feasible. But that's kind of my idea of my strategy is might be able to accumulate a little more crypto, we'll see, but for the most part it's just riding it out. The foundation is all set for being like survival and thriving for months, and without, I don't know, so I mean, like, I've been preparing for this reality for over a decade, and specifically here building for, this is the 9th year, but understanding the reality from 2007-8 of the Too Big to Fail, how their response to Too Big to Fail is destined to fail in an even bigger way than the risk of the Too Big to fail. So they just leveraged up the fail and delayed more. So for anyone who's paying attention then, we've been getting ready for this eventuality because we've been paying attention. And what else can I say? Allodium is a cooperative, and it's meant to help people be abundant and organize and work together in order to thrive in this new culture, which is really the old culture, but the culture which values absolute rights to property and individual sovereignty, what the nation and of America is founded upon. And that's what I guess we're gonna return to one way or another. And that's the end of this part. I'm going to tag on that other part, and I guess this is a decent transition. And that's the transition. Inflation endgame. How does inflation play out? This is something that 1 in a million people know, and it's why the con works so well. So as we're seeing inflation that hasn't been seen in 40 years, we should look at what caused the inflation to end 40 years ago, and that was by raising the interest rates up to 20%. Currently, interest rates are around 1%, and inflation is at 8%. So the interest rate has to be above inflation. The problem is, for that to happen, the whole economy, which is all based on is a debt bubble, the whole thing will implode. So instead of doing that, what these Keynesian type governments have done throughout history, and they'll do the same thing this time, is they will continue to create new money in order to extract all of the wealth in the pool of the economy, which is using the current currency. Money, currency, sometimes I use them interchangeably, but in this sense, the money, the currency, is the dollar, even though, strictly speaking, the dollar is just a debt-based currency, and gold is the money. But in the current economy, the currency isn't backed by gold, so the money is actually debt. It's a debt-based currency. So in order for the inflation to be solved, what it means is that the people are going to be getting in more and more debt continually. And what happens when the people are unable to take on more debt is that the people themselves get liquidated. And that can be via warfare, that can be via starvation, that can be via concentration camps, but the people all get killed. And that's what the government does, because the government isn't your friend, and it's not even really there to just, government. It's there to govern and to control you, but also to extract value out of you if you are a subject of that government. So, as the government continues to create more currency, the amount which they create is the rate of the value being extracted from the current economy. And as the economy gets smaller, they have to print more currency, and the currency becomes worth less, but they have to print more and more, create more currency in order to get the same value, for that value extraction rate out of the economy to continue until the final point, which is that there is no more value in that economy to be extracted, and people no longer have confidence in that currency. So long as the confidence is maintained, then the control of the people can be maintained, and you can literally send people on trains to death camps or labor camps, or on trains to go just fight and die killing their neighbor, like is happening in Ukraine right now. So Ukraine's a great example of what the future looks like for all of these Western debt-based economies, is that they're going to steal all of your wealth and then send you to go die, so that you don't turn against the people who you're paying your taxes to, the people that you think are your leaders. They are going to kill you so that you don't kill them. Even if your intent isn't to kill them, they understand that's their intent, and if you ever understand that that's their intent, then you might do something about it. So better to liquidate the population after you've stolen all their wealth than to steal all their wealth and not liquidate them, because then you have a bunch of poor angry people, and history has shown that a bunch of poor angry people end up turning upon the people who stole all their wealth and who have all of the wealth. So the solution is to liquidate the population. The exit ramp from this reality is to stop consenting. It's all just based upon consent, and the reason that people consent is that they are afraid of the consequences of not consenting. If I don't pay my taxes, the IRS will come get me. If I don't show up to the draft notice, the police will come and get me. If I don't give up my gold, my money, based off of the government dictate, then they will punish me somehow. So I got to do whatever the authority figures say, because they're the authorities, and I'm afraid of what might happen if I don't obey the authorities. So it's fear that keeps people trapped. And as soon as they realize that the outcome of consent is poverty and death, and that the people who they're consenting to only have their worst interests in mind, then people have the potential to wake up and to act independently and to resolve the situation, whether that be by withdrawing consent, creating solutions which are outside of the prevailing system, or just replacing the elected government with a new elected government. In some places they can have votes of no confidence, in other places they chop their heads off. It all kind of depends on the culture and the mentality of the people and the history of the people and the degree to which they have become indoctrinated and docilated. That's not really a word, but you know what I mean. But the word I'm looking for is domesticated. The domestication rate of the people. If they're completely domesticated, they would never do anything against their master. And if they're free, they realize that they are their own master and they need not bow down to any other being, because the only supreme being is God. And the United States was founded upon that principle, that it's one nation, a nation being a people under God. So a people who don't bow down to other people, but a people who are sovereign of themselves and who have only God above them. That was the founding principle of this nation, which is supposed to be America. But anyways, so the end. What happens is that the more technical understandings to try to invest and to get ahead of it is that the government keeps printing more money, so prices go up. They print more currency because they can't print money inherently, but they print more currency, with trying not to get into the semantics too much. And so the prices continue to go up. People continue to get poorer by the nature of their purchasing power going down. And as the government does this, it breaks the contracts with all of the other countries. And so what they necessarily have to do is then rely upon the military in order to mobilize the populace, liquidate the populace, and weaponize the populace against the other countries and nations which aren't going along that same route. For if everyone follows the same route, then it can just be a cycle of depopulation where the elite become more elite and the masses become more impoverished, and there's a separation, a bifurcation that the elite, to use that word, I guess, that's their plan. And so you can see how it unfolds, like in Ukraine. So in Ukraine, they weaponize the information and they monopolize the mass media in order to turn the people to be completely toxic and hostile towards their neighbor, Russia. And then they weaponize the people and they use the military to attack the neighbor so that the war is instigated, because an integral moral person can only take so much abuse before they respond with force. And every person or peoples have a different toleration for that abuse. And once the response has been initiated, it tends to play itself out over a period of time. So the dollar-based empire is in the process of liquidating its vassals before that wave of liquidation reaches the center, the Fed. So first is Ukraine, And then next up, we'll see Poland and these other countries. And it's basically just conscripting the people and sending them out as cannon fodder, and causing the enemy, who's the people, but is also the other countries who are more of a threat, because they have the weapons, whereas the people, for the most part, don't have the weapons, and the government has the weapons, which is why these governments always want to disarm the people, so that they have all the weapons and they can abuse the people as they choose. So they play the saint as if they're the good guys, and to get the consent of the people as much as they can, in order to go to accept the lower standard of living and to accept the warfare going on. And the people are the weaponized pawns that are also the sources of income and wealth. So it should be very clear how it's playing out and how it will continue to play out, but becoming much more local. You can look abroad to see the trends and to see what it looks like, but the same trends will come here. So if we want to be insulated from that inevitable violent, toxic beast, then we need to understand its methods and its means, so that we can be prepared for the ways in which it will attempt to rob us and then kill us. So what we're seeing is a planned famine, planned energy crisis. They're going to take away everything that people have, their energy, their money, and they're going to feed them poison. They're going to mandate poison. And then they'll turn the people against each other, and all the while they'll continue stealing all of their wealth. So that doesn't get to how do we avoid that. So personally, I hold value in this foundation, which is real and sustains life and is on free and sovereign country that I personally secure. And then as far as money and currency, I place value in precious metals and Bitcoin Cash. The issue, well, precious metals are very stable for savings. There might not be produce available to spend them on during times of scarcity, but that value will remain in order to be able to be traded, bartered, transacted when those goods are available. But the primary resource is the goods which sustain life, like food, shelter, water, and also community, quality of life, networking, family relations. All of these things are important, and that's what the enemy is trying to degrade and break down, is the communities, the family units, and the individuals themselves, so they become derided, non-integral cogs, essentially. Bitcoin Cash and crypto in general, it's a free market currency, which is a balance of supply and demand with a mathematically set inflation rate. So whereas in the currency of the US dollar, it's unknown what the inflation rate will be, because it's unknown to what degree, how quickly the authority figures will degrade the currency, will inflate the supply so that all the existing currency has less value. And there's other things that they can do as well, affecting the supply chain, affecting the confidence in the overall country. But the current administration is without a doubt a controlled demolition administration, with a demented puppet at its head. Dementia. Literally, he has Dementia is no idea what's going on, and it's planned that way because that is the best way to undermine the confidence, is to have the leader being the person who you can't have any confidence in. So it's the polar opposite of Trump, who's like this total confidence figure. It's you could even call him a con man, because he doesn't actually represent the people, but he just represents different interests, as opposed to the global power structure, which is behind Biden. That Trump was representing the national power structure. So they're both power structures that intend to rule over people, but they're just different groups of them. And so what the governments will do is they'll herd everyone and take away their options in order to extract all of their wealth, and they'll try to do it efficiently, just like Germany did. They did it very efficiently. They had different checkpoints where all your luggage is shed here. That's like 1 degree of wealth, and then all your clothes get shed here. That's another degree of wealth, and then your bodies get shed over here. And then you just dispose of them, and we'll use the other bodies to dispose of those bodies, because we're not going to do any of the work. And that's what it's either that or the warfare model. If you can get the people to go fight for you, then you get even more value out of them than just straight up exterminating them. And this might seem dark, but it's the reality of human history, and it's the result of these cycles. They call it the fourth turning. But these generational cycles of general awareness in the populace, and economic cycles, and cycles. It's just cycles that repeat throughout history. So it's not novel that you have tyranny. It's something that cyclically happens throughout human history. It's a reliable thing that continues to happen. And the reason it happens, for the most part, is that people allow it to happen. And the reason they allow it to happen is because they become slowly indoctrinated to the point where they take no individual responsibility, and they just defer their entire existence to the collective. And eventually that works for a while for the collective, and it thrives, and then it stagnates, and then it decays, and then there's a terminal phase. So we're well into the decay phase, and we're very close to the terminal phase, because you can see it in Ukraine. It's basically just a slaughtatorium, where the cannon fodder is, the people are just conscripted everywhere. They have like just secret police going around just arresting people and sending them to the front lines, and the people they get stuck between the people who will shoot them if they run away, and the enemy who will shoot them if they try to fight. So the people just get totally screwed as soon as they consent. I just saw a video of a gas station in Ukraine. 2 people pull up on a bike. Some military people come out. Like, those people thought they were going to go get snacks at the gas station, and the military is like, no, we're conscripting you right here. One of them obeys, and they go with the military person, and the other one flees on his bike. So one of them is going to war to die or be killed or have to be in this nightmare slaughtatorium. The other one escaped for that period of time. Like, that person was thinking. It was independently thinking. I don't point to myself, but I was pointing to the brain. Like, they had some independent thought. So those who blindly consent, their fates are sealed. Those who think independently, they take their heads out of the sand, and it's a brutal reality that we live in. And yet, by facing it, we can take appropriate action to avoid the worst outcomes and to make choices to guide ourselves towards the most ideal potential outcomes. So when we get to the economics of Bitcoin Cash, which is all part of this, because as we're seeing the currency lose value, the competing currency, which Bitcoin Cash is a competing currency with the dollar, its price is going down. So that means it's losing value faster than the dollar is losing value, its purchasing power. Reason being that people are having to spend that money, that currency, that value, which they have speculated as a future investment in this currency. And because they have less abundance, their value is getting liquidated, and so they have to sell this thing. However, the potential is there that that this currency can help us to be able to continue to transact. The issue is that it's intermediated by technology, and so long as that's the case, it's probably more of a long-term solution than a short-term solution. So investing in Bitcoin Cash at this point is it's great for being able to make transactions and stuff, but so long as it's in a downward trend and you're losing more value in that than in the dollar, then people are more likely to keep their currency in the dollar, and they're only going to be speculating on Bitcoin Cash as far as more long term, which is kind of the opposite of its use case. Its use case is as a currency, but it's this inflection point that has to be hit where there's more demand for the currency than there is the inflation rate. So we know the inflation rate for Bitcoin Cash is less than 1.8%, but the price that is going down isn't necessarily, it's greater than a 1.8% going down. So it's going down because people are selling it, not just because of the inflation rate. But for it to go up, there has to be more demand than, in price of US dollars, it has to be more demand than the inflation rate. And the reality is that the dollar is losing value, is guaranteed to lose value at a certain rate per year. Well, it's an uncertain rate, it's a variable rate, but at this point it's above 8% every year. So it becomes very speculative, high risk, high reward to be dealing in cryptocurrency when we know the conditions are leading us to life and death scenarios, when what we really need is food, shelter, arms to defend ourselves, and the liquidity of the currency is secondary. So don't buy more than you can afford to lose. But I'm not selling my Bitcoin Cash. I'm not spending it. I'm spending what and little amount of dollars I have. I've mostly invested my dollars into other things that aren't going to lose value as much as the dollar. And the only thing that I basically have invested in that is losing value more than the dollar is Bitcoin Cash. And the reason I do that is because I think that's temporary. I think that as the dollar hyperinflates, as people are liquidating their positions, there will be a flight to safety in the economic sense. In the real sense too, people are going to migrate towards places where they have more opportunity, where they'll feel more safe. But economically, people will migrate their economy into that which will maintain its value. And so I think that will be precious metals and also cryptocurrency. And so that's why I'm holding both. But my priority is still building out this physical foundation which can sustain me, my dependents, my potentially family, and those who I am, and others who of their free will choose to be in alignment with the values here in Elodium, which are posted in the Affirmation of Truth, Rights, and Responsibility. So I'm going to leave it there. That wasn't where I was intending to get to. I was like wanting to hype Bitcoin Cash, and I'm always wanting to promote its adoption and its usage, but I also want to be realistic about everything that's going on in the economy. But I think it's very possible that Bitcoin Cash could be 10x its price that it is now, measured in US dollar terms, 10x its purchasing power in 1 year, or it could be 1/10 of its purchasing power in a year. It could, or it could be more. It could just, as the dollar hyperinflates away, it could demonstrate incredible value. Or you could have the government pass these regulations which make it, and utilizing their tech company pawns that they have all this leverage over, to make it completely inaccessible. So it's important to understand the risk. So the reason that I can afford to hold Bitcoin Cash is because I can afford to lose that wealth entirely if it comes to that. But I don't plan on losing all of that wealth, and I plan on even selling gold to buy more Bitcoin Cash in the future, potentially, or silver. And just one little update for Elodium is Elodium has 0 US dollar reserves anymore. It has 0. For a while it had some, as well as primarily gold and Bitcoin Cash, but now Elodium is completely liberated from the dollar. There are 0 US debt notes in Elodium. It has 0 debt to the federal system, and the federal system has 0 jurisdiction over Elodium for the same reason. I personally still have some dollars held in my alias name, which is a legal alias, but it's not my true name. So if the system wants to attack that which it thinks is a person, they can destroy the alias, and I can sacrifice the alias without losing my true self. Kind of like a corporation can provide an umbrella of shelter from the shareholders by correcting one's status and lawfully changing one's name while legally maintaining the previous name, the previous alias. It can be possible to continue to have one foot in both worlds in that debt-based system, and into the world of sovereign individuals that take responsibility for themselves and are completely liberated from that governmental system of federal slavery and subjugation. So I'm going to leave it there. Lots of food for thought, and I will just end on the fact that I do promote Bitcoin Cash, I do promote precious metals, and I do promote off-grid solutions. And depending on one's situation, one's means, how far one is into the system of subjugation, what is appropriate advice for someone varies greatly, because the most appropriate advice is always the next step someone can take. If you tell someone who's maybe ready to take one step towards liberation that, listen, you've got to take 10 giant leaps and completely transform your life, they're not going to be open to that. But if you can provide, and that's what wisdom is, like, wisdom is knowing how to apply the truth, the difference between truth and wisdom. You can spit the truth in a way that's not wise and cause people to move further from the truth because it's a truth that they can't handle. So it takes wisdom in order to know what truth is most appropriate in order to provide somebody that they're able to digest and integrate towards a a more integral, liberated, and free state of being. That's all for now.